CNN has unveiled how their microphone muting is going to work. Dominic Michael Trippi says CNN is 100% rigging this debate. Here's how the ridiculous microphone setup will work. Check this out.
If we go behind the podiums, you can see 2 green lights. When they're on, they signal to the candidate his microphone is on. When the green lights are off, they signal to the candidate his microphone is off. Now I want to give you a sense of what it will look like for viewers at home if a candidate whose microphone is off interrupts a candidate whose microphone is on. So I'm standing at one podium, and I'll ask Phil to come in and take the other podium. And so let's say I'm answering a question. My light is green, and I'm speaking. Phil's microphone is off, and his green lights are not illuminated. He's going to interrupt me as I'm speaking, and this is what it will sound like. My volume remains constant, while Phil's interruption can be difficult to understand.
Let's try the opposite. My microphone is now on. Victor's microphone is off.
It's like for kindergartners, I guess.
Very much.
Me. My volume remains constant, while Victor's interruption can be difficult to understand. Now, CNN's production team has shared this demonstration with the campaigns earlier today, and we're sharing it with you, our viewers, so everyone fully understands how tomorrow night will work. Now, we should note, by agreeing to participate in this debate, both campaigns and candidates have also agreed to abide by these rules. The CNN presidential debate airs live tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
I don't think this matters. I actually think it's going to be moderately tame. I think Trump is going to be in line. We saw the debate in 2020. It's not going to be like 2016 when he was saying you'd be in jail and all that stuff, funny stuff. It may be. But I also think that you see how close they are to each other in this video?
Trump can yell.
It doesn't matter if we can hear Trump or not. Biden can.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult to talk when someone's yelling at you or talking over you. And that's all that matters.
And I also think they're both hot-tempered to a certain extent. Definitely there are reports of Biden being pretty hot-tempered. So even being able to hear someone saying stuff off camera will be distracting and potentially sway any sort of coaching that he's had if he's thinking he's going to spar with Donald Trump directly. And, you know, if we're talking about his mental acuity, if he's easily confused, having someone talk to you while you're trying to make a point is not going to help.
You realize the power this gives Trump.
It's the guy whose bloodstream is entirely Adderall and adrenaline versus the guy whose bloodstream is entirely McDouble cheeseburgers from McDonald's. That's kind of what we're looking at, I guess.
Well, I don't.
Dr. Pepper too. No, Diet Coke.
Diet Coke.
How could you say that?
But just check this out. Donald Trump at the podium, and he's saying, "Look, we're going to have a very great immigration policy. It's going to be the best we've ever seen." And I'll tell you. And then he cut his mic off. And then as soon as you see the green lights goes off, he looks over and goes, "Biden, your mother." No one will have heard him say it, and Biden will go, "Hey, what the?" And Trump will just go, "Whoa, that was what?" Cutting off the microphone of Trump doesn't hurt him. It allows him to say things the American people will not hear that will trigger Joe Biden.
It's you'd be in jail, but now it's just going to be in Joe Biden's ear. Like, we all enjoy the side remarks. On the other hand, it's just going to be Joe Biden, and the moderator's getting more and more deranged and irritated.
What if they cut off Trump's mic and he just starts going, "I'm coming for you, Joe. I'm coming for you."
He should do the most disruptive.
He's going to be like, "How's Hunter doing? How's Hunter? Is Hunter okay?" Like, he's just going to provoke him in these ways that get really under his skin. I mean, I don't know that he will do this, but these are options that
say that it was great that you're talking to your granddaughter now.
Trump should do this because nobody will hear him, and Biden does not have the mental capacity to handle these kinds of emotional attacks. One of the things about people who are suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia, we assume Biden is in deep senility, is they have a harder time controlling their emotions. If Donald Trump says something like, maybe Biden's in the middle of an answer, and then he says something like Donald Trump, convicted felon, and then Trump says audibly to him, "And you are the worst father this country has seen. You're a disgrace. Shame on you. Shame on you. Your son's dead."
Yeah, I think pretty much everybody on the Biden campaign is probably dreading this moment. That it seems like Trump, is very, very quick on the draw, and it's just everybody's expecting him to eviscerate Uncle Joe.
Well, that's also one of the things that I think works in the Biden campaign's favor, right? I mean, the fact that we're all trying to figure out if Joe Biden can even make it through this tells us that the expectations for him are much lower than they are for Trump. And again, I think, I've said this a couple different times, but I think the best thing Trump could do is to push Joe Biden to answer directly on his records. Are you audibly gasping over there?
No.
Phil thinks I'm boring tonight. I'm sorry.
Every
I'm
night.
doing the best I can. You take that back immediately.
Look, if you throw meatballs up, I'm going to hit him, all right?
You're off the tour. Anyways, I think ultimately the function of the debate is to see these two clash. It's like the long-awaited rematch between two fighters. People really want to see what's going to happen and what the time in between has done. And I think really the last 4 years have been marked by the fact that Biden seems to be less with it, and he has a terrible economy, and the border crisis is undeniable. In fact, it is so undeniable, it's one of the major issues in this campaign. Immigration is something people used to stay away from, and now it's front and center. I think it's going to be obvious that Biden can't defend his record, and it's really the emotional aspect of this debate that his campaign is trying to manage.
Tomorrow is going to be wild. I mean, this is history. It's a historical debate. It's outside of the Commission on Presidential Debates. It's the first time, is my understanding, that a president has debated his predecessor in an effort to win, for both of them to win the presidency. We've never had this happen before. And Joe Biden is an 81-year-old bumbling dotard, and Donald Trump is a reality TV real estate mogul who eats fast food religiously. I mean, this is
Big Mac King.
Big Mac. Wow. I mean, like, everybody who knows Trump knows he's a fast food guy. It's like you were saying, his blood is Big Macs and Diet Coke. And Joe Biden, you said Adderall. Oh, they got him on everything. I bet he gets stem cells. I bet he gets NAD+. I bet what was the Myers protocol or whatever? It's a vitamin drip. They're
just like tons of B12.
Oh yeah,
like just upping it all the time.
For sure. I bet he's got a blood boy.
It's funny how many people actually are like assume this. But like I was talking to Connor from Counterpoints earlier today, and he was like, oh yeah, he's gonna have about an hour of whatever where he's gonna be all hopped up, blah blah blah, and then after that it's gonna be all downhill. I feel like that's essentially what's assumed about the guy. And
you know, it'd be really hilarious if just like halfway through the debate, you see Biden just with something in his leg, and then he goes, and then his pupils dilate, and he's like, all right, let's go.
Hypothetically, they're not allowed to bring props on stage, so they have to sneak it past the moderators.
An EpiPen is not a prop.
Oh, okay, for his asthma.
Yeah, it's actually working. It works. It's not a prop, it's not fake.
No, I mean, the other thing that I found really interesting is that they can't interact with their campaign staff in the commercial breaks. So there's 90 minutes, two commercial breaks, and they both just have to, stand there?
Well, one thing that makes that interesting is that Joe Biden and President Trump President Biden and President Trump, I should have the same standard for both. They both have better instincts than the people around them. I think that's basically true. I mean, Joe Biden, you can say that he's somewhat calculating and amoral, but like the guy knows about power. He knows how it works, and he knows what's going to help him win. His abilities seem to be in decline. But one of the things that frustrates me a whole lot about this moment is each side is not really hitting the other in a way that really works. If Joe Biden wanted to hit President Trump in a way that worked, I would hit him by saying that President Trump doesn't actually want to solve immigration. And the reason for that is, if you look at the technologies at play here, if you look at all of the kind of absurd backbiting of his first term to consolidate the restrictionist kind of sensibility behind Stephen Miller, like all of that. I mean, Stephen Miller was famous for sandbagging other restrictionists in the executive branch. And so, Trump letting that go on is to me a sign that he doesn't actually want to solve the problem. And likewise, if Trump wants to hit Biden in a way that hurts, Republicans are not willing to say and really hit Biden hard, hit the Democrats hard where they're really failing, which is that Joe Biden is failing to rein in the Netanyahu regime or the Netanyahu crime syndicate, if you prefer. It is Joe Biden's biggest failure. While our bombs rain down on Gaza, Republicans are silent and they're not hitting the opposition in the way that they ought to be.
It's too esoteric for the average person watching CNN.
Dead babies aren't esoteric.
No, these issues are absolutely too esoteric for the average person.
I don't think that's true at all.
You look at polling. What are the two biggest issues Gallup's got right now?
I mean, the polling shows that America's general pro-Israel sensibility has declined by a notable amount.
That doesn't even measure anywhere on the top charts of what matters most to Americans.
People care about ethnic cleansings.
People care about that, but when you ask the average person, list your priorities, they don't mention Israel.
Well, I think in a lot of cases they aren't allowed to know what's really going on. But
that's besides that still doesn't affect anything. That my point was, I said this is too esoteric for the average person. Honestly, the reason why
paying
Trump
for an ethnic cleansing isn't esoteric. Your taxpayer
it literally
dollars.
is. Like you just saying it's not esoteric does not change the fact the average person has no idea what you're talking about.
We just had a half an hour discussion about an obscure constitutional maneuver.
Absolutely esoteric, 100%.
Okay.
We are not at a presidential debate talking about how to sway middle-of-the-road voters who don't know the record for Biden or Trump.
I mean, this is the biggest albatross around Biden's neck. It's causing enormous fissures in the Democratic coalition.
Only among
the way to exploit them is to say that Biden is too weak. That's the absolute standard attack line of an opposition party. You say that the guy in power is weak, and instead
that's
of doing,
not esoteric.
It's not
saying
esoteric.
something simple and generic and lowest common denominator. This guy's too weak. Look at him. He's a weak old man.
He's weak on the Netanyahu regime.
That's getting too complicated for the average person.
I think that's nonsense.
They can't even point to where Israel is on the map. They can't even point to where Ukraine is on the map.
Well, these evangelicals sure love it a whole lot.
But you're talking about a minority population. You ask the average person.
I mean, they're Republican-based
the average
voters.
person where Iraq and Afghanistan is. They can't find it on a map. And the funny thing is, most of them don't even know. The average person who can even tell you about the slight nuances of Iraq and Afghanistan won't even be able to tell you that, in fact, Iran's right in the middle. I mean, that's fairly obvious to anybody who paid attention to the Bush years about what we were doing with our military bases. This stuff is over the head of the average person.
I respect your point of view that we stand for the people, but they're dumb as shit. I really love that. I as a sort of an elitist guy, I kind of agree with it.
Saying something is esoteric is quite literally the opposite of you demeaning and insulting them. Me saying if you're trying to speak to the average person, you have to meet them where they are is very different from you saying, haha, you think they're all dumb as shit.
Well, I think they're smart enough to know what their tax dollars are going to.
Yeah, most of them don't.
I think
smart enough and having knowledge are two completely different things. Right. I mean, you clearly are a very elitist individual who is very concerned about Israel and thinks the average person lives in the same world you do.
Do you think the average person wants their tax dollars being spent on bombs that kill children?
Absolutely not. And you know what? The
we
issue
just told
there
them.
is not, hey, Israel, Netanyahu, and Gaza, because they're going to go, I don't know where that is. But the issue is, we shouldn't spend money on foreign war. And they'll go, that I understand.
I think this is just you not being willing to talk about Israel.
I think you are obsessed. And if you look at any of the polling and the top issues, Israel doesn't register. But you live in a world where you think it does, and you're refusing to accept that.
Do you think
this I refer to as Israel derangement syndrome?
I don't think it's... Look, my point of view on this is actually quite moderate, but I do think that it matters. Like, we need to rein
never said it didn't.
We need to rein in Israel for the benefit of Israel.
I think we should stop spending money on all the foreign wars and stop funding all these foreign enterprises.
It's not even that simple. Like, Israel has been, even before October 7th, was going through a constitutional crisis. And
I don't care about Israel at all. Like, you bringing up Israel's constitution is like saying the marshmallow man from My Little Pony turned blue. I don't care.
There are several 100,000 people in Israel who vote in American elections, and some of them in rather important states that are often very close. I mean, it matters.
They're American citizens.
Sure. Yeah.
You're talking.
But if I were an American citizen who lived in the West Bank, what would be the number one issue you voted on? Your security.
How many
I think that's normal.
how many Canadian dual citizens are there? And how many of them are influencing our politics, particularly in Hollywood? Isn't Seth Rogen a Canadian?
I'm Canadian. I'm a dual citizen. I'm influencing
we got a problem here. We got dual citizens
No,
here.
I think the real issue with the Israel-Palestine thing, for the debate at least, is yes, that people are unwilling to talk about it as an issue, and also that it has become a major issue for young activists in America.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but some of them. I think this is the major. I actually personally think this is the reason why there's not a live audience at the debate, because they are too afraid that there will be protesters who are going to bring this issue up.
And Trump's going to laugh.
That's the thing. There's no audience because they're unpredictable. They don't know where they'll fall, and they know at this point that this has become an issue that is siphoning voters away from Biden. There are reasons that people voted no confidence or someone else in a primary where Joe Biden's the incumbent and no one's challenging him.
Do you think that the average American is against the idea of supporting Israel?
It's just not that simple. I would argue that what I think should be done is pro-Israel. So, like, what I'm trying to say is that the U.S. has a role to play in stabilizing what's happening in Israel. Israel, before October 7th, was going through a constitutional crisis. In general, the country is drifting into the Chinese and Russian orbit. If that continues, that poses risks to American Jews. That's bad, and we need to actually act to rein them in. And nobody's willing to say that right now. And it's a really sinister deferral of responsibility. In general, I think, like a lot of these activist lefty types, they say some unfortunate things, but their hearts are in the right place. But their biggest problem is that they make it all about Zionism. If I were a Jew living in Israel, I would be a Zionist. And like I think it's just like a perfectly normal and healthy nationalist sensibility. They want to embark on a collective project. But we need to just, in this moment, it's not about being pro-Israel or not. It's about how we want this relationship to be.
What about our relationship with Saudi Arabia?
I think that there's an even better case for cutting ties there.
So do you think the American people care more about Israel or Saudi Arabia?
Definitely Israel.
Why Israel?
All sorts of bonds of affection. The fact that our technological infrastructure is intertwined.
Well, I mean,
in
like
all
as
these ways.
I understand, I agree with you on that. Like there are Israeli dual citizens, less so with Saudis. But I mean, like as it pertains to the domestic policy of the United States, with foreign spending and foreign interference and foreign treaties, which issue do you think affects the American people more and they'd be more interested to hear about, Israel or Saudi Arabia?
Definitely Israel.
Why?
Because of the, I think a lot lot of evangelicals care quite a bit about Israel for all sorts of strange and I would argue,
it's really bad.
Wow. Of the power
rather heretical theological reasons. And then also Jews for, sort of ethnocentric reasons.
How many
care
people
a lot
is that?
about
between evangelicals and the Jews?
many tens of millions.
Tens of millions in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of evangelicals.
I'm just asking you the number.
And I think, evangelicals, their problem is that they just don't think about this in a sophisticated enough way. Like, what needs to happen is, even to preserve a U.S.-Israel relationship, we need to act to rein them in. There are people in the streets every day protesting Netanyahu's government. There are hundreds of thousands of them.
So you said that you think that because we're not reining them in, that's pushing Israel into China and Russia's orbit?
That's right.
Can you expand on that?
The Israeli right has a number of huge Russia problems. A lot of Russian Jews are involved on the Israeli right. And then in 2017, Benjamin Netanyahu said, Israel makes the perfect junior partner to China. Now think that through a little bit. I mean, if Israel becomes essentially a client state of China, every Zionist in the United States becomes a security risk.
Sure.
That is a eventuality that we should do almost anything to avoid, because that's the moment things actually do become dangerous for Jews. When being anti-Israel or anti-Zionist becomes coterminous with being anti-China, that's when things get dangerous. And like my argument is that we need to act right now to prevent that from happening. And also, Netanyahu is a criminal.
What policy or prescription do you think the United States should do to prevent that?
I think the Israel lobby should be subject to the Foreign Agents Registration Act, a number of the key organizations.
Do you know...
in general, Israel flouts foreign influence laws more than any other.
So
do you know
how
what
does that deter China? One second. How does that deter China? Sorry.
Because it forces them to be more of a vassal of the United States.
So I want to explain. This is why I call it Israel derangement syndrome. So I don't care for anyone's particular ideology, their pet peeves or personal issues that they think are the most important. I care about what can we look in aggregate data. I don't think it's fair. Shout out to David Pakman when he makes a video saying his disapproval rating skyrockets and he finds a singular poll to back up his ideas. At the same time he made that video, at the time, I made a video where I said Trump's approval rating is better than ever based on aggregate polling, where we try to assess as much information as possible and find that data. When you go to Gallup, which is numerous months where they've been tracking this, there are many, many issues that outweigh. In fact, Israel isn't even a single issue on the chart.
Did they poll on it?
They did, and it bundled up with Middle Eastern war. In fact, the federal deficit...
They know more than we do.
The federal deficit rates higher among the interests of the American people than Middle Eastern conflict does at 5%. We can take a look at the cost of living and the economy in general at 12 and 7.
That's true until there's a Middle Eastern conflict.
And there is. And so you have government poor leadership in the current month at 21%, immigration at 18%, poverty at 6%, abortion at 4%, elections at 4%, unifying the country at 4%, ethics, more religious family decline at 3%, foreign policy at 3%. Maybe we can add foreign policy and war in the Middle East and make that 6%, and still immigration and economics dramatically outweigh that as an issue. So going back to the main point, if Donald Trump wants to actually win over voters, the issues he should focus on are going to be immigration and the economy. And particularly the number one issue, Biden's failing mental acuity, which is currently number one and actually was number one 5 months ago. But immigration was number one for 3 months in April, March, and February, according to Gallup. Gallup may be wrong as a single point of data, but using this source, these are the issues that people generally care about. Typically, the other polling we've seen didn't list government poor leadership at number one, which is why this one was surprising to me. Immigration tends to be the number one issue because immigration ties to everything else. But Israel isn't even on the map.
I mean, the fact is, if immigration is going to be handled by Onderil and Stephen Miller and these sorts of people, it's not going to be fixed.
That's not the conversation.
Something
we're having.
else needs to happen if Trump is going to be credible.
So if we're talking about at the debate, what can Biden say? What can Trump say? It has nothing to do with that conversation about who's going to be running it. The question is, what will Trump or Biden say that will win over voters? The big weakness Biden has right now is that, according to Gallup, one of the biggest concern right now is poor leadership in government. And that is something Trump can easily attack on. If Trump gets ultra specific on, the reason I ask about Saudi Arabia is that over 100,000 people have been killed in Yemen in the past, 5 years?
Yep.
And that never comes up. Saudi Arabia recently, the petrodollar deal, the 50-year deal, expired. That's over, and they're not re-upping. So now they're starting to do deals in rubles and yuan. That never comes up. That is a bigger threat to the American economy and the American people than anything pertaining to Israel. That's why I mentioned that. And still, I will say this. If Donald Trump on the debate stage says, under Joe Biden's watch, the Saudi petrodollar deal has ended without an extension or a plan, the American people are going to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. It doesn't matter to me, and it will win over no voters, despite being probably the most important issue affecting the U.S. outside of perhaps escalation into World War III with Russia. Like, if we're talking about what's going to happen to this country, you've got a handful of things that really matter. The petrodollar deal expiring with Saudi Arabia means China's going to start buying and selling oil in Chinese currency. And the U.S. doesn't manufacture enough to bolster its economy outside of producing dollars in the Federal Reserve. Without that deal, Saudi Arabia can dump oil into the market, undercutting the U.S. and destroying our economy, which is why we used to beg Saudi Arabia not to pump oil. And then Saudi Arabia, getting mad at the U.S. administration, whichever it may be, would be like, we're going to pump some oil into the global market, and it's going to screw over your numbers. That matters dramatically because we're talking about mass inflation, standard of living dropping dramatically because the whole system of petrodollar economics in the United States is built on U.S. military power. Without that deal with Saudi Arabia, and it's not the only thing that matters, but it's one of the most important, our economy is undercut. Then you can look at immigration. Then you can look at civil disorder and social decay at the government level and these various issues. These things matter the most, but are so far, they are so esoteric and so in the weeds, the average person is going to be completely lost if you try and bring it up to them.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe and we'll see you all there.